Brought to you by Bangkok Bank.
Good morning, Asean. Freshen up your world, your thought, and your idea with us every weekday from 7:30 to 8 a.m. You're with me, Patsurang Desha Putharangsi.
And I'm also here with you, Nirchamalisaklarmi, and it's already Monday, the 16th of September 2013. Let's start first with the political situations in Cambodia, as Cambodian police yesterday fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse hundreds of protesters near the royal palace as they attempt to remove the police barbed wire barricades in order to march through a street in front of the royal palace. National Military Police spokesman King Tito told Shinho's news agency that the police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse them from the area. And one witness reported from the scene said that tear gas was shot into the crowds of about 500 protesters and water cannons were fired from 2 fire trucks. One demonstrator was killed, according to prominent activist U Virak, president of the Cambodian Center for Human Rights, and at least 10 other protesters were injured. Military police spokesman King Tito said that he was unable to confirm the death. He denied the security forces has fired live ammunition, but he said that the military police used only batons and shields, and police used tear gas but did not use the live rounds. Thousands of Cambodian opposition supporters on Sunday marched on street in the city against the July 28 elections results that handed victory to Prime Minister Hun Sen's ruling party. The protest, organized by the opposition Cambodian National Rescue Party, or CNRP, of longtime opposition leader Sam Rainsy, aimed to reject the election results that showed the ruling Cambodia's People's Party, or CPP, won with 68 parliamentary seats and the CNRP received the remaining 55 seats. The CNRP claimed that its party should win 63 seats, with the CPP getting 60 seats if alleged irregularities during the poll were fairly investigated. Security has been tightened throughout the city on Sunday as barbed wire barricades have been placed across major roads. At the park, Sam Rainsy told about 20,000 supporters that the party would boycott the opening sessions of the parliament on September 23rd if there was no proper solution to the alleged irregularities during the July 28 elections. He said the mass protest would last for 3 days as makeshift tents had already been set up at the park for protesters to sleep at night. And after his speech, he led thousands of protesters march on street in the city. There was a brief confrontation between police and protesters when some protesters had tried to remove barbed wire and barricades on banned roads, but anti-riot police exercised utmost restraint by not reaching to the removal.
After a week of violence in the southern Philippines, security forces still continued to maintain Muslim rebels after it has already killed 61 people. Philippines Army spokesman Ramon Zagala told reporters at a news conference in Zamboanga City that the Army's top priority was keeping civilians safe. More than 62,000 people have been displaced by the fighting, which entered its 7th day on Sunday. Hundreds of homes razed, a hospital burned down, and civilians used as human shields by the rebels holding them hostage. Well, he said, "We want to ensure that the operations we are doing, the priority will be that no civilians or hostages will be hurt or killed." Sporadic firing resumed early morning at 2 districts in the southern Philippine city of Zamboanga as the government troops moved to clear the rebels out of the villages. Houses were burned and explosions were heard during the gunfight. Officials said several of hostages had escaped their captors during the firefight. The army said that at least 100 residents were trapped in rebel-held areas, with some residents stranded by the fighting appealed for food and water. Among the those that killed in the fighting were 51 members of the breakaway faction of the MNLF, or the Moro National Liberation Front. 90 people have been wounded. Zagala said that his only demand was for the rebels to give themselves up and face justice. He said that they can just simply muzzle down their firearms, wave a white flag, send an emissary, and walk out. we will accept their surrender unconditionally. Then we will process them, but they must be answerable to our laws and whatever violations of our revised penal code. They must be answerable. A brief ceasefire collapsed on Saturday, and troops were still battling rebels in Zamboanga, a port that is home to 800,000 people, and the nearby island of Basilan on Sunday, forcing thousands to flee. The violence has paralyzed the port, shutting banks and businesses, setting around 300 houses on fire and grounding flights. The rebels made their surprise attack on Monday, September the 9th, trying to march through the city to plant a flag of independence. 4 decades of conflict in the south have killed historically around 120,000 people already, displaced 2 million, and stunted growth in the poor but resource-rich area. Muslims account for about 10% of the total population of 97 million. Of course, the majority of them are Catholics.
And the Myanmar Labour Minister said that he has reached an agreement with Malaysian authorities for the undocumented Myanmar workers in Malaysia to be allowed to return home without being charged. Amin, Minister for Labour, Employment and Social Security, and other senior officials went to Malaysia between September 9 and 12 to discuss the issue of illegal Myanmar migrant workers in Malaysia. There, they held a press conference on their arrival in Yangon on September 12. According to Amin, he said at the press conference that the main concern is the undocumented Myanmar workers. For those who want to work there legally, there will be an issues officials document to them. And next, there will be negotiation for the runaway workers who are no longer needed by their employers and the kids at the detention centers not to be charged under the Malaysian laws. There are over 1,000 Myanmar migrant workers who are waiting to return home, and previously each undocumented worker was charged with 400 Malaysian ringgits under the Malaysian law. And meanwhile, Myanmar migrant workers who will return home will be required to undergo verification tests that involve using biometric system to confirm if they are actual Myanmar nationals, according to the minister. The minister also said that fingerprints of all the 10 fingers will be taken from those who will return to Myanmar. Iris scans will also be carried out, and it is important to confirm that they are Myanmar nationals. And after data were collected, they will be sent to the immigration department in Myanmar, and verifications will be made. Then they will be able to come back home. Amin also said that there are over 250,000 Myanmar migrant workers in Malaysia. Among them, over 110,000 are undocumented workers, and some 8,000 of them are holding UNHCR refugee cards. And since the bouts of violence attack on Myanmar migrant workers in Malaysia a few months ago, hundreds of Myanmar nationals have been returning home every month.
Australia's incoming Foreign Minister Julie Bishop said on Sunday that a new Conservative government would work with Indonesia where we need to, but it was not seeking permission to implement controversial refugee policies. Bishop, Prime Minister-elect Tony Abbott's nominee for top diplomat, said Australia respected Indonesia's sovereignty, but it would forge ahead with sensitive plans to combat people smuggling that were met with a cool response in a Southeast Asian nation during the election campaign. Abbott plans to tow back asylum seeker boats from Indonesia in a military response codenamed Operation Sovereign Borders, while buying up fishing boats to keep them from the hands of people smugglers, embedding Australian police in villages, and paying locals for intelligence. Indonesia's Foreign Minister Martin Natalegawa said Jakarta would reject the plans as not in the spirit of partnership between the two countries last week, adding that the issue would be a top priority for talks with Abbott ahead of the month's APEC summit. Well, but Bishop insisted that the policies would be implemented in a television interview today. Well, over the next few days and weeks, we'll be working cooperatively with Indonesia, said the Australian authority. But she pointed out, we are not seeking Indonesia's permission to implement their policies. We're seeking their understanding. Well, actually, she also added that we will work cooperatively with Indonesia where we need to.
And now let's have a look at our special report by Kun Weena on the special interview with Simon Tay, the chairman of Singapore Institute of International Affairs.
As the U.S. is considering cutting down the quantitative easing. But a Singaporean think tank suggests that although it will be tougher for Asia and ASEAN economies compared to the last 5 years, it will not be hopeless.
The Asian economies are expecting a large capital outflow of $1.4 trillion due to a possible U.S. tapering of the QE. This move by the U.S. Federal Reserve is widely expected as the economy gradually recovers, according to Simon Tay, chairman of the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. However, the chairman said he believed the magnitude of the crisis will not be the same as the 1997 and 1998 financial crisis, as most of the banks in Asia, as well as ASEAN, are solid. Currencies are now floating rather than fixed, like the 1997-1998 crisis.
I think Indonesia and its rupiah has come under a lot of pressure because fundamentally it hasn't reformed enough. You see, when the capital was very high here, we in a way became too comfortable and we didn't continue to reform and open up our economies. Now, in the crisis, we've got to do that. We've got to cut subsidies, we've got to manage the balance of payments and the trade deficits. We've got to manage our budget deficits. And I think if we can keep that, there is a solid reason for ASEAN to continue to grow.
He said the trigger points behind the weak currencies in the region have been India and Indonesia, who have current account, trade, and budget deficits. He also said India has refused to open its economy for retail and politicians are not fulfilling their promises. As investors see capital lessen, they need to move elsewhere, and in this case, the United States will take back some of the capital. However, he suggested that other capitals will come in if the reform is done right. Tay gave an outlook for the rest of the year for the Asian region.
Well, when you say Asia, it's quite differentiated. The growth of America should help us. Honestly, our economies like Singapore are still exporting, linking to America and the West, still very strongly. I think that the Japanese Abenomics will bring some capital back to the region as well. So I wouldn't be overly dire, overly bleak about Asia and ASEAN. I think there's a lot of room to grow. But it will be harder than it's been in the last 5 years. The last 5 years, with the American problems, everyone turned to Asia and more to ASEAN. Now there'll be a more balanced outlook for the world, and I think if we can ride out this period, a more balanced way forward.
Addressing a recent conference, the Julius Baer Next Generation Summit in Bali, Tay spoke about the ASEAN integration. Regarding Singapore's position in the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, he said it was important for Singapore to realize that it cannot work on its own, but there should be a win-win cooperation. He said once the AEC will be launched, Singapore will play a key role in linking the northern part of ASEAN, and Thailand will link the southern part, as Thailand has the ability to reach out for Indochina, which Singapore cannot compete with. He explained Singapore's role in linking the rest of ASEAN counterparts, saying Singapore should take the lead in helping the flow of investment and finance in the 10-country region.
Singapore is one of the most open economies. One of the biggest M&A deals this year has been of a Thai tycoon, Charon, buying a very old Singapore brand, and there was no problems with it politically. Now, for Thai companies to buy into Indonesia or Malaysian companies to buy into Thailand, it still remains a bit of a question mark. I think increasingly we'll have to solve those questions. We have to make ASEAN much more open for ASEAN flows of investment and finance.
The Singaporean think tank said the ASEAN community has a clear roadmap. The point is to deliver as many objectives as possible. Report by Weena, Bali, Indonesia.
The first episode of the Tibetan series is after the break. brought to you by Bangkok Bank.
And thousands of villagers in Indonesia yesterday fled after a volcano erupted on Indonesia's Sumatra islands, spewing rocks and red-hot ash onto surrounding villages, according to officials. Mount Sinabung in Karo district, North Sumatra province, was erupted violently before the dawn. According to Asean Nations, the head of North Sumatra disaster agencies say that more than 3,000 people have been evacuated from areas within a 3 kilometers or 2 miles away radius of the volcano, and they are all safe. 5 halls normally used for traditional cultural ceremonies had been converted into shelters for those displaced. Sutopo Purwo Nugroho, National Disaster Agency spokesman, say that 3,710 people had so far been evacuated. Nugroho said that it was the second recent eruption of Sinabung. The volcano was dormant for nearly 100 years before eruptions in August and September 2010, forcing about 12,000 people to flee. Indonesia has dozens of active volcanoes and straddles major tectonic fault lines known as the Ring of Fire between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. And last month, 5 people were killed and 100 were evacuated when a volcano on a tiny island in East Nusa Tenggara province erupted. The country's most active volcano, Mount Merapi in central Java, killed more than 350 people in a series of violent eruptions in 2010.
Well, I've just recently traveled to Tibet, China, by the invitation of the State Council of Information of the PRC government. So here is the first report of the Tibet series. Let's see the traditional Tibetan medicine on this roof of the world. Tibetan Autonomous Region is situated on the Tibetan Plateau with an altitude of over 3,600 meters above the sea level. With its geographic uniqueness, it is expectable and understandable that first-time visitors would mostly be welcomed by the special character of the one and only roof of the world. The sentimental moment when my 2 feet touched the Tibetan soil was a series of dizzy and woozy feelings. And I saw the Lhasa airport swirling in front of me, followed by a state of faint in a standing position. Shortly after the sudden high-altitude attack, I began breathing harder and harder in every move and step I made. I realized a little bit after a local Tibetan officer, who was one of our tour guides, suggested everyone in the group to breathe slowly and don't panic over this special plateau attack. She confirmed there was a cure to it. Traditional preventive measures against acute altitude sickness were common in every hotel in Tibet. The measures include daily beverage like butter tea, herbal tea, and a box of liquid medicine with special herbal ingredient. The medicine will help the body adjust to decreasing oxygen levels at higher elevations to avoid altitude sickness. This local wisdom to cure the high-altitude symptoms has long originated from the world-famous Tibetan medicinal practice, which is the ancient synthesis of the art of healing. Tibetan medicine was established during the 7th to the 12th centuries AD. Fundamental theoretical concepts are based primarily on the Indian Buddhist system of medicine that concentrates on a stable state of mind. I got the opportunity to visit the first and the oldest medicinal and pharmaceutical factory in Lhasa, Tibet, to witness such artistically Tibetan medicine.
Medical practice in Tibet has a very interesting anecdote because historically it could be traced back into 2,400 years ago. Well, here I am at the Tibetan traditional medical pharmaceutical factory. Of course, the manufacturing of Tibetan medicine in every level of production is based solely on the natural ingredients and herbal medicines. And of course, many of the elements have come from the peak, the top of the mountain surrounding the Tibetan Autonomous Region. Follow me.
According to
to Dr. Losan Dorji, president and director of the factory, the institute was founded in 1696. The factory has become well known for its effective Tibetan medicines, whose raw materials are all produced in pollution-free areas at the altitude of more than 4,000 meters in Tibet. He said the combination of the traditional processing methods of Tibetan medicines with modern research and technologies to produce effective medicines was the Institute's key accomplishment. He also stated that the Institute is thankful to the central government of China for the investment sum of 160 million yuan. This has contributed to the institutional capacity to export the medicines to Europe, namely Portugal, Russia, Vietnam, and Mongolia. While the other doctor, acting as an exhibition hall caretaker, takes us around and explains more about Tibetan medicine. Tibetan medical philosophy is a holistic philosophy involving the harmonious operation and balance of all the energies to constitute the human psychological and physical being. The mind is considered to be the base because all existences and moments depend on its movements. It is the creator of every external and internal phenomena. There are 4 methods of treatment, according to her explanation. 1. The one through diet. 2. The one through behavior modification. 3. The one through medicine. 4. And the one through physical therapy. As well as its curative role, Tibetan medicine has played a crucial part in preventive health care within the villages, emphasizing water and spring cleanliness, good diet, and healthy lifestyle practices. Such healthy lifestyle practices of the Tibetan people have also interestingly revolved around places that become the World Heritage Site. We'll catch it up in the next episode. Patsurang Desha Puttarangsi reports.
That's it for today's edition of Good Morning ASEAN. We'll see you again, same time, same place, same channel.
I'm Nirasha Saklamia.
นภัสสุรังเดชาพุทธรังสี
สวัสดีค่ะ